All right. Okay, great. Welcome. It's noon, almost noon on September 10th, 2025. So I'm so glad everybody is here. And today we're talking about why bullies don't want you to strategize or do anything different than what it is that you're doing right now. Bullies like you reacting. Bullies want to bully you. They want to be able to treat you however they can, gaslight you, public humiliate you, call you names, change expectations, deny you promotions, and all those things. They want to be able to do all of that, and they want you to react and respond like you have been. They like it when you get emotional. They like it when you cringe and take a step back. That's making them feel powerful. And they also like it when you escalate and you mimic their behavior, because then what you're essentially doing is you're saying to them, this kind of stuff is okay. And you're giving them permission to keep doing what they're doing. And yes, documenting and reporting are super important things to do, but if you are being bullied, you need to respond strategically versus reacting. And even if you think you don't want to, the very fact that we're having a conversation today about bullies who don't want you to change your behavior is the very reason you should want to do it. If bullies don't want you to do it, that's enough for me. I'm going to want to do it. And the reason they don't want you to do it is because you're predictable. When bullies do A, you do B, right? So for example, I was predictable when it came to being bullied. They sent out a nasty email, I responded. They sent out a nasty email, I responded. And they got exactly what they wanted. I reacted to what they were doing to me. And that makes bullies powerful. If you think of bullies a little bit like a balloon, right? When they start, they're pretty deflated. They don't feel like they have a lot of power. They don't feel very valuable or important in the workplace. And so what do? They want to empower themselves. And in order to empower themselves, they treat you like crap and they bully you. So every time you react and respond in a predictable way, you're helping the bully inflate their balloon, their ego. They feel powerful when they do that. When HR doesn't hold them accountable, that balloon gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we want to do as the people who are being affected by bullying the most, when you're being bullied, is you want to suck as much air out of that balloon as possible. And so that's part of strategizing. And so that's why it's super important to strategize. Sorry about that. I have a cat over here who was high up on some place that I didn't want her to jump down. And so bullies often have strategy themselves. Now, they're probably not thinking, I'm going to do A and then B will happen. But when you react and they invoke emotion, that's part of their strategy. The response and the hurt, that's part of why bullies bully. And when you respond differently, you don't give them emotion, then you're not predictable anymore. And that deflates the balloon. When your reaction to their bullying changes and you don't become emotional upset, or I stop responding to every email they get, then they don't know what to do, right? It sucks more air out of that balloon. And so your response disrupts the bully's bullying, and that's why they don't like it. They don't want you to strategize. what will happen when you start to strategize is bullies will come at you harder, right? Because they're like, what is going on? I have sent 10 emails and I've gotten an okay from Jan in all those 10 emails. That's not okay. They crave the reaction. That's what's feeding them. And when you take that away by strategizing, I could have not responded to every email, I would have stopped feeding the bully. And when they don't have meat, so to speak, myself, to chew on, that again deflates that balloon and they lose power. And if I lose power because I think I'm a powerful, person as a bully, that's unsettling to me, right? And my reaction, I don't like that. And I'm going to be uncomfortable because one of the things that bullies get comfortable with is the chaos. Because really, if you think about bullies, they're a little bit like the puppet master who's creating all this conflict and this issues and this disruption and this chaos, and they're behind the scenes saying, loving it, getting inflated by watching all of the chaos they've created, right? Think of it as the Wizard of Oz. The wizard was behind the curtain, creating all of these things, feeling mighty powerful, when in fact, the wizard wasn't powerful really at all. It was all these things that they were creating and the illusion of that made them powerful. And that's a lot like bullies. And when you strategize and change what you're doing, again, sucking the air out of the balloon, that's off-putting and upsetting to bullies. So if you stop reacting the way you are, if you stop becoming defensive, if you stop becoming defensive, my attacking you and telling you that I think your work is terrible doesn't land the same when you say, okay, I hear you, right? The response back loses some of its power. And again, that's another reason bullies don't want you to strategize, so that they don't lose their power. Bullies also, again, get a lot of power from manipulating other people to do their bidding and to do their work. So when you stop reacting, bullies will send other people out to do their bidding, like bystanders, right? So if the bully's tactic isn't going to work as effectively on you, they'll send someone else. But when you use a micro script and say, okay, or you don't respond to every email, it still sends a clear message back to the bully and also to the bystander that you're just not going to respond to their bullying in the same way that you used to. And bullies rely on people being scared of them. They want you to fear the bullying. Again, that's making them feel powerful. And when you don't respond in the way that they think you should, in that predictable fashion, it changes the power dynamic and also the group dynamic. Because bystanders also rely on you being the person that's bullied. Because what will happen is if a bully doesn't get the reaction they want, or rather, bullies don't get the reaction they need from you, they might shift to someone else. But if bystanders see and watch you and notice that you aren't responding like you used to, and you're not scared of the bully, because when they come at you, you're using silence, but you're still looking at the bully straight in the eye, your feet are firm on the ground, your shoulders are back, and you're deep breathing, but you're not saying anything, that is not only strength and courage, but it sends a message to bystanders that they don't have anything to be afraid of. They can do the same thing. So you're actually role modeling good professional behavior and ways to shut down the bully's tactics and shenanigans. And the other thing is, if Bob is coming after me and is yelling at me, calling names, and generally what I would do is I would mimic Bob's behavior back. I'd raise my voice, I try to defend myself. Again, that gives everybody around a lot of stuff or behavior to cover up. And bystanders will go with the bullies version, which was, well, it was only Jan yelling at Bob and Bob wasn't doing anything, right? I'm giving them ammunition when I yell back. But when I am silent, again, feet planted, looking at Bob and not saying anything, there isn't as much for the bystanders to have to, there's really nothing there's not as much meat for them to repurpose, right? Because it's harder for them to believe I'm the problem when I'm not saying anything. When I'm responding back to Bob and mimicking Bob's behavior back, it's much easier for bystanders to see me and confirm that I'm the problem, so they're much more likely to cover Bob. But if I'm not doing that and I'm being silent, I'm being professional, and I'm not responding to Bob in a negative way, then bystanders, it's more difficult for them to confirm that I'm the problem. It also signals strength to bystanders that they can do this too. Because many of the strategies, again, when I'm working with people that I recommend are really just good professional behaviors that any good, healthy workplace should be not only teaching, but should be mimicking and role modeling for people. And so these are just good standards that we haven't been taught. And when you get into a bullying situation, it's chaotic, we're frustrated, we're hurt, and we don't know what to do, and we often react to the bullying in ways that are not beneficial or helpful. The other thing it does is that it shines a light, so to speak, on the bullies' shenanigans, right? And their abuse and harm. Because when I'm defending myself to Bob, or I'm reacting to Bob, or I'm sending Bob a nasty gram back through email or those kinds of things, again, Bob's behavior is justified. You see, Jan is a problem. You see, Jan is a troublemaker. Again, it confirms that my side bias from HR and leadership and all those things. Excuse me. But when my behavior, when I'm always taking the high ground, when I'm silent or using neutral scripts, and I'm deflating Bob's power and ego, and I'm responding professionally, what it actually does is it shows how really ridiculous and horrible Bob's behavior is. Because if I'm standing there while Bob is yelling at his highest, and he's calling me names, and his face is turning red, and, maybe there's steam coming out of his ears, and I'm just standing there silent, nodding my head, not responding negatively, it shows people, if they look, what Bob is really doing. Now, I do want to preface it with this. Again, you can only take so much bullying before you react in a way that is where you just are like, oh my God, I can't take this. That happens. okay? So what? Bob's a real jerk doing that kind of behavior all the time. When you're being piled on, not only by Bob, but your coworkers and your boss and HR, yeah, I get it. Sometimes we, for lack of a better term, we snap. That's okay. It happens. But responding with microscripts, responding with, the gray rock method, where you try to be as boring as all get out so Bob has nothing to come after you for. When you use silence and all these different very, very easy but strategic responses to what Bob's doing, you take away Bob's power. You change the power dynamics. You can alter the group dynamics. You can show Bob and everybody else what he really is, which is a real bully, right? And you can shed that light on that. Because I think one thing we think often, and we get these messages over and over because we're socialized into being the quote unquote victim, the one who's the bully has quote unquote chosen in the workplace to go after, is that role that we're in makes us feel powerless. And we feel like the only thing we can do is to react to Bob in a way that is similar to his, right? And so we do those things because we think that's maybe the best way to handle Bob, is when strategic response to what Bob is doing is your best bet, because Bob doesn't want you to do it. Because Bob is scared of it. Bob doesn't want you to change the power dynamics. Bob is the only one who gets to change the power dynamics. Well, not anymore, right? Because you can strategically respond, and that hurts Bob. Not literally, figuratively. And the other thing that it does when you're strategically responding is it gives you power. So at the same time, you're deflating Bob's balloon, right? You're inflating your balloon, right? And so you're regaining some of the power Bob has taken by reacting to Bob in ways that shut down Bob's shenanigans, or maybe it doesn't shut it down 100%, but at the very least, what it does is it shows Bob, you're still in the game. You're just dealing him a hand he doesn't know how to play, because he's a hamster on a wheel doing the same thing over and over. And now when you respond differently, when you respond strategically, it's a game Bob doesn't know how to play. And what it does, which is most important, what it does for you is you gain a sense of control of the situation, because the first time you watch Bob take a step back, when you're not saying anything to him yelling at you, that feels good, because you realize that you can influence what Bob is doing by how you respond. And at the same time, you're showing your peers what good professional role modeling and good behavior is. And the most important point is, when you respond differently to Bob, you gain strength and confidence, and that makes you feel more powerful. And that's what you want, is you want two things to happen. You want to suck the air out of Bob's balloon and put air in yours, so that there becomes more, where you have more of a sense of power in your workplace, and realize that Bob doesn't get to dictate everything, that you can still make a difference in the workplace. I hope that makes sense. So thank you so much for being here. If I can do anything for you, please comment, like, follow, do all those things. And you can also, if you have any issues or concerns about workplace bullying, please email me at jan@stopbullyculture.com. And I wish you a peaceful week.